And welcome back to a new video on the Essex Boys case. As always, if you are enjoying the content, please do give the video a thumbs up. And if you're interested in the Essex Boys case or simply true crime in general, don't forget to hit the subscribe button below. A horse-drawn carriage festooned with balloons led a cortege of mourners as family and friends paid last respects to murdered Patrick Tate. Relatives dabbed at their eyes to hide their grief as they left St Gabriel Church in Pitsea following a moving ceremony. One Floral Tribute simply said, "Daddy." A card attached read, "Thanks for the good times, I will never forget you." A large tribute made out of individual lettered floral wreaths read, "Brother." It said, "You will always be in our thoughts and never forgotten in all our lives." As the coffin was carried into the church by 6 pallbearers, one heart-shaped red and white tribute rested on top. Around 60 mourners sang all things bright and beautiful and recited the 23rd Psalm before leaving for another service at Pitsea Cemetery. TV viewers are helping detectives put together the last minutes of 3 drug barons executed in a country lane at Rettendon. But police admitted there was no big breakthrough in the search for the lone cold-blooded killer. Actors and murder squad officers reconstructed the macabre shootings on the LWT programme Crime Monthly. Within hours of the show, police received between 20 to 30 calls from viewers, mostly anonymous. A police spokeswoman said, "Although there is information for us to follow up, there is nothing of any major consequence to report." Police are still hoping the reconstruction will encourage vital witnesses to come forward. A cortege of 20 cars followed a horse-drawn carriage containing Craig Rolfe's coffin, which travelled from his mother's house in Beambridge, Pitsea, to St Gabriel's Church, Rectory Road. More than 70 mourners attended a service conducted by Reverend Laurie Blaney, at which he said a few words prepared by Rolfe's partner Donna Jaggers and his mother Lorraine. Rolfe, 26, of Calshot Avenue, Chafford 100, was shot twice in the head in a Range Rover parked in a remote track at Rettendon near Wickford on December the 6th. Pals Patrick Tate, 37, of Gordon Road, Basildon, and Anthony Tucker, 38, of High Road, Fobbing, were also murdered at the scene. The killer is still on the run. After the funeral, the procession of cars, including 3 black hearses, drove the short distance to Pitsea Cemetery. Wreaths were laid at the burial, including one from Miss Jaggers and their daughter, which said, "You are not gone until you are forgotten, and we will never forget you." The following newspaper article is from December 1995, with the headline, "Behind the peace and love of rave culture is big money and big crime." As the icy dawn of Thursday broke over the flatlands of southwest Essex, Peter Theobald of White House Farm went out to feed his pheasants. He and his friend, bricklayer Kenneth Jiggins, had often joked about the route they drove towards the open fields. A rutted, snow-covered track, where they had previously noticed not only the debris of lovers' assignations, but empty blown safes abandoned by robbers. 300 yards from the road, their way was blocked by a stationary Range Rover. Mr. Jiggins got out to investigate. As he moved to tap on the driver's window, he stared in horror. The 2 men slumped in the front seats had no faces. Behind them, a third man lay with his abdomen ripped asunder. The car interior was thickly caked in congealed, freezing blood. Mr. Jiggins had stumbled on the aftermath of one of Britain's worst gangland killings, the product of deadly long-running conflicts centred on the trade in youth culture's most popular drug, ecstasy. The 2 men in front, Craig Rolfe, 26, who bought the Range Rover just a fortnight ago, and Tony Tucker, 38, sometime bodyguard to the boxer Nigel Benn, could be identified only by their fingerprints. Police believe the killer first shot the man in the back seat, Patrick Tate, 37, and that Rolfe and Tucker then turned to face him. The assassin was a professional who used the advantage of surprise to blast the 3 men to death with a pump-action shotgun in the space of 1 or 2 seconds. He would have believed he had no time to waste. It was only rarely, police sources say, that any of the three victims, who were all violent criminals, ventured out unarmed. There were no weapons found on the bodies. This, the police believe, is the biggest clue to the murderer's identity. For Tate, Rolfe and Tucker to have agreed to travel to such a remote spot without being tooled up suggests that they knew and trusted their assailant, who was almost certainly a close criminal associate. The likelihood is that he travelled with them to the fatal rendezvous. Yesterday, as the murder squad, led by Detective Superintendent Ivan Dibley, continued piecing together the history of the victims' connections and possible vendettas, it was clear that the killings fell into a pattern. Sandwiched between Harwich, one of the principal entry ports for ecstasy, cannabis and amphetamines imported from the Netherlands, and organised crime's traditional stamping ground in East London, Essex has become a national black spot for violent criminality. Tate, Rolfe and Tucker were all members of a widespread villains' exodus from the East End. All had served prison sentences for burglaries, organised car theft and serious assaults. At the time of their deaths, all were wanted target criminals being kept under surveillance by the elite detective unit responsible for the fight against organised crime, the South East Regional Crime Squad, in the months before their deaths. The fear engendered by Rolfe and Tate had been graphically demonstrated. The police have a series of videos taken in and around the Highwayman public house in Basildon, which the gang used as a base for dealing in ecstasy and a range of other drugs. Some of the tapes depict Tate and Rolfe administering savage beatings to customers and minor league dealers who had somehow displeased them. In others, they are shown slashing victims in the face with knives. Yet despite this evidence, the police had not been able to prosecute. Not one of the victims was prepared to make a formal statement to detectives, let alone agree to give evidence in court. Tate himself had been on the receiving end of earlier vicious attacks, and he too had refused to talk to police. Not, however, through fear, but as a result of the unbreakable underworld taboo against becoming a grass. Last year, he was shot in the arm on his Basildon doorstep. The incident led to his own appearance in court, charged with possessing an illegal firearm found beneath his hospital bed. He was released from jail only 5 weeks before his death. In his case, it was already grimly apparent. Another few months in prison had done nothing to rehabilitate him. On the night before his murder, he ordered a home delivery pizza with different toppings on each quarter. Told this was not on the menu, he drove to the restaurant, held the till against the wall, then brutally assaulted the manager Roger Ryle, punching him and smashing his head against glass plates stacked in the sink. Mr. Ryle suffered severe cuts and concussion, but he too declined to press charges, after police warned him that Tate, an 18-stone bodybuilder, might easily decide to return to do more damage. On an earlier occasion, when he was wanted for robberies, Tate hurled an off-duty police officer through a plate glass window after he was seen in a supermarket. 2 years ago, he attacked 3 officers escorting him to court and overpowered them. He escaped on a waiting motorcycle which had been provided by his associates, then ended up in Spain. Then he made the mistake of visiting Gibraltar, where he was arrested and extradited. Another case linked to the murders is that of Darren Kerr, alias Matthew Evans, a known business associate of the 3 dead men. Last August, he was abducted from the streets of Purfleet and had acid thrown in his face. As he recovered in Billericay Hospital, a gunman dressed as a clown shot him in the chest. The gun had been concealed in a bunch of flowers. Kerr recovered from the attack, and he too refused to make any kind of statement to the police. But the murder squad is working on the theory that the clown with the gun and the White House Farm killer may be the same man. In moving from robbery and other forms of theft to the lucrative trade in drugs, Tate, Rolfe and Tucker conformed to a wider pattern. Tate is known to have formed a close relationship with the leading Basildon crime family for whom he is thought to have been working during his time in Spain. Detective Inspector Barry Cooper of the National Criminal Intelligence Drugs Unit said, "The people involved with the sale, and to some extent the UK manufacture and importation of ecstasy and amphetamines, are traditional criminals who have entered the trade for money, with established criminal connections." Some of them are East Londoners in their 50s and 60s who have been around a long time. They were street thugs in the 1950s, armed robbers in the 1960s and 70s, then maybe importers of cannabis. In my 28 years of police service, they are people I have known about for a long time. They have a wide variety of convictions, including serious violence. You are dealing with an economic commodity, and if you invest money, sometimes you have to protect your investment. According to the NCIS, organised crime with bulk importation and some local manufacture accounts for about 70% of the ecstasy sold in Britain. The rest is brought over on the Dover and Harwich ferries from laboratories in the Netherlands and Belgium by Little League ants. Picture the sight of a long line of ants marching up a branch to collect leaves for the nest, Mr. Cooper explained. The chain beyond men such as Tate, Rolfe and Tucker extends to still more dangerous criminal organisations. Increasingly, the huge quantities of precursor chemicals needed to make the amphetamines or ecstasy are being supplied by the beleaguered pharmaceutical industries of Poland and the CIS. Inevitably, this end of the trade is controlled by the Russian mafia. As costs rise and the police become more effective in Belgium and the Netherlands, the East Europeans are turning to finished drug production. Only about 15% of the UK's speed and ecstasy is made locally. However, it is no coincidence that the biggest British factory busted to date was in Essex at Benfleet, a few miles from White House Farm. As ecstasy has spread across the country, its price has plummeted, from £25 a dose 5 years ago to just £10. Yet the profits remain immense for the group of criminals at the level of Tate and his gang, say NCIS. Those profits bought Tucker a £250,000 bungalow and a string of luxury cars, and Tate a new Mercedes. Rolfe, the youngest of the three, owned an £80,000 house bought without a mortgage. Many thanks for joining me for today's video. Shortly, once the outro starts, you'll be able to see some other videos from the channel, so please feel free to check those out. And also the Essex Boys playlist, which has all of the videos concerning this case in one convenient folder. Thanks again for checking out this video. I look forward to seeing you again in the next one. Take care. Cheers.